as per the title, you're here for our webinar where we're talking about how to optimize Azure and Microsoft 365 spending. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andy Brown. I'm the product director here at Coacho. It's my job to look after all of our product strategy and our go-to-market. And I'm delighted that I'm also being joined by Lawrence Dale, who's the CISO and product director at a company called Surveil. And I'll explain a bit more about why we've got Lawrence here, but I'm delighted he could join us, and we'll be doing a demonstration of the product that underpins some of the services that we'll be talking about today. So the agenda for today, just to a little bit from me, kind of setting the scene and how we've reacted to what's going on out there in the market with Azure Optimization Manager and M365 Optimization Manager offerings. And then, as mentioned, it's going to be a demonstration. Lawrence will be taking you through the tool that underpins some of the service that we can provide. We'll have a bit of time at the end for questions, so please do. There's a Q&A function in the webinar. Please do raise questions as we go through, and we will try to get through all of them at the end. This tends to be a topic that sparks quite a lot of question and answer, so it should be interesting to see what we have at the end there. If we can't get through them all, I'm sure we'll be getting back to you anyway. But for now, let's crack on. So, in terms of setting the scene of what we're seeing out there, I guess this won't come as a surprise to anyone here, but that the shift to the cloud, and in particular the shift to consuming everything as a service, has been underway for some time now. And there's an element here of we're starting to see organizations that are fully across and are now actually consuming everything as a service, and everything is effectively now on a level of pay as you go, whereas previously it would have been done differently. For us, the customers we talk to, and indeed for you, if you're talking to us and on this webinar today, we see that as being anchored around the Microsoft Azure and M365 stacks. We really do see those as the foundation stones of a modern IT strategy, and clearly we're closely aligned with Microsoft, work closely with Microsoft. And indeed, the services that you see today are designed specifically for Azure and M365 because we see these as the heartland of IT strategy. I guess the big shift to cloud and the big shift that we've seen to everything as a service is that it's actually created something very different for IT organizations as a whole and businesses as a whole. Is a very different way of actually budgeting and billing all of this. We've got the interesting scenario of going from what was traditionally quite CapEx based spend. You would buy kit, you would rack it up and run it. You would be responsible for it. You could choose how long you would run it for and how long you're going to sweat the assets for, depreciating assets, all these kind of things. And actually, that has now shifted to something that is much more reactive to the bills that are coming in. So there's a big focus now on looking at how is this OpEx-based billing model being managed. And I think the reason we're starting to see this is it is actually getting harder. The bills themselves are pretty complex, but also generally what the trend we're seeing out there in the market is fundamentally one that things are getting more and more expensive, and we're in cost constrained times. We're seeing budgets being squeezed. It's now becoming an area that is under scrutiny, I guess, for a lot of organizations. And I guess, some statistics that we pulled together briefly for this, to give you an idea, you can see that the total number of subscribers across Microsoft's Azure's base has been growing, but it's growing steadily. But what is noticeable is that fundamentally the revenues that Microsoft are taking from Azure are growing more substantially over time. And that is something that must logically therefore mean that across everyone, ultimately you're seeing those Azure bills and going up over time. It's a logical conclusion. And this is partly due to the adoption of Azure, but it's also the fact that over time we've seen the spend can potentially bloat up, and there can be some opportunities to start actually looking at savings now that you've been running Azure for a period of time. And so what's that's driven in the market is, and this is a term that we're starting to hear more and more here in the UK, is the emergence of the term FinOps. So this is the ability to start looking at how do we manage the finance of cloud spend in particular in a different way. And I think, as mentioned before, we're seeing that this is now a top table conversation in many organizations, is the amount of money that's going out of the business on their cloud spend. It's OPEX spend, it's a bill to the business. And it logically, what we've also seen is that this emergence of FinOps is something that this came out of the US. So we saw that the FinOps really follow on behind the market that adopted cloud first, which generally was the US market. So if you actually look at overall cloud adoption in the US, it will be ahead of the UK. And in terms of total penetration into the market, this is something, therefore, that logically they're a bit further along the path when it comes to actually thinking about what are we going to do about the bills here. A shout out to the FinOps Foundation. So this is actually a project of the Linux Foundation. And it is designed primarily to look at the management of cloud spend, not specific to Microsoft or Azure, but to all cloud spend, and how is that managed better on an ongoing basis. And what they've created is a very interesting framework and guidance and certification program for individuals, organizations to start to work in a more consistent manner when it comes to actually managing all of this. And the way I describe it for some people is a lot of people now understand the concept of ITIL and the ability to run service in a more standard manner and the frameworks and best practices. This is a bit like a similar sort of thing, but looking at the billing and the management of spend across cloud in a more analytical and standardized way. A quick shout out, and I think probably what we see is they've just published their annual report. I think it's well worth a read, and you'll see that there's a link there in the presentation, which we will be making available as a PDF at the end of the session. But there are a few things at the top there that I think are probably what we're seeing as common challenges when we talk with clients about this. And the first one is fundamentally, we've got potential wastage or unused resources in our cloud spend. Potentially, we've got the opportunity to commit to spend and to gain savings, but we've actually got to then manage that in a better way. So managing that commitment-based spend and making sure you're not over or under committed, which is an interesting challenge in its own right. For budget setting, how do you actually forecast what your spend is going to be going forwards? And how do you actually start to model out not just, how will your cloud spend go in the future? And also, probably the final one I will mention is actually when you receive your Azure or Microsoft bill, how do you actually start to allocate that cost out? So for many organizations, they will do internal recharge of this quite substantial bill. How are we actually going to divide that up so that the people that are consuming, or the areas that are consuming the resources more, are actually paying their fair share? And that is a major challenge we see across a lot of organizations today. So look, for us at Coach, what we've done is seen this in the market, and we've created Azure Optimization Manager and Microsoft 365 Optimization Manager solutions. And the idea of this is these are solutions that are powered by the Surveil tool, which is something we're going to demonstrate to you today, which gives you an opportunity to really see the power of the insights that the tool can provide. But what I would like to emphasize, and the reason why we tend to offer this as a service, is this is a tool set potentially for a functional role in an organization that potentially isn't there yet. And so this isn't a tool that you just turn on and forget. This is a tool that will need ongoing maintenance, management, feeding, watering, and actually acting on the outputs that you get from it. But so like I say, that's how we've set that up. More than happy to have a conversation with you as a follow-up to this, I'm sure, about that. And we have product sheets for both of these if you want some further details. But for the time being, I'll leave it there. We've now hand over to Lawrence, who's going to take us through the power of the portal itself, which I think will bring this to life for you. So Lawrence, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Surveil demo. I'm just going to share the screen, and Andy, if you can just confirm that this is visible, that would be great. Okay, so
yeah,
here we
that's
are.
come across loud and clear, yeah.
So Surveil is a tool that connects to very simple onboarding steps on a read-only basis into your Microsoft subscription for Azure and also 365, hinges off Azure Active Directory or now Entra ID. And we ingest your activity information, but more importantly, all the billing data. And as we'll see on 365, also ingest what you have in your EAs and CSP information. So really everything that's relevant to you, and it's your pricing, your billing, which means that the outputs are very specific to you and also accurate to your bill and what you'd expect to see. So we start off on the dashboard, and you can see from the experience here, we've got the ability to have two. We'll look at the M365 dashboard a bit later, but we'll start with the Azure part of the platform. And we've got navigation on the left-hand side across the menu structure, and the menu access here is controlled by a concept of personas. So there's a lot in the product, and so restricting it down to what you want to see is controlled through the persona capability. So on the home dashboard, you get to see an overview of what you have with your daily run rate, monthly run rate, and you can start getting a sense of what the analytics experience is like when you're driving through the product. And you can see here I've got pop-ups over some of the menus and more detail to dive into. But if we switch to going into Azure, and this is following what Andy said around FinOps, we've got the inform, optimize, operate lifecycle through FinOps, and we'll start off with, well, what do we need to know about our tenant? Show me what's happening across my subscriptions and what's happening with any particular hotspot. So at a high level, this is where we are. This is a small demo tenant, as I'm sure you can see by the numbers, but it's enough for you to get a sense of what's going on. So we've got a few hotspots here, so I can click on this and start driving the analytics on the page, and you can see things changing. So we'll actually want to dive a little bit deeper. Show me what's going on there. Okay, it's happening in this region, and we can drill all the way down to the resource level. As we get further into the product, you'll see we can also have some drill throughs to go right down to those levels. So you can see here we are, it's Power BI embedded, and if we expand a little bit more, I've got the specific resource. Okay, now I've got some right click options on those. If we switch through to start diving into the detail, and we're sort of starting with a bit of an immersive deep dive just to show you that yes, all of the detail is here, and we present it through a number of different lenses depending on the analytics you want to surface. And so that's very much for those who want to get into the weeds. And then we also have the recommendations engine, which we'll come on to shortly. But you can see here from the layout, we've got the monthly overview. And this is also where I'll introduce the concept of our smart tags. So you can see in the middle here, we've got smart tag by line of business. And this can be switched to a number of smart tags. And you can even create your own to make it specific to your business. This is great for anyone in IT finance or finance colleagues to say, look, I want to align this up to our cost codes or cost centers or particular business units, depending on how you're structured, and marry up with what you've got in your perhaps ERP and finance platform, all the way through to what you see coming through here. So you can make sense of those bills and that consumption as it comes through, apportion costs by project, by department, to make sure that that internal sort of show back and charge back can take place. So very simply here, I can see I can highlight transport. It's got a bit of a hotspot in June, and then we can start driving into the analytics there and get an overview of the resources that were consumed in that sort of period. Well, Andy talked about that bill complexity, and that's largely why this company exists. We're sort of born out of frustration with the bills we got doing cloud transformations back in 2012, 2013, and what came out was, not humanly consumable. And still isn't today, albeit FinOps starting to drive some standards with focus, etc. But you can see the tool here is really looking at this through a number of lenses. And here is a simple sort of billing data by month overview to then say, well, for that very complicated set of outputs, here we are with a simple screen that allows you to drive analytics and really boil it down to what's important to you, where you want to see yourselves on track with budgets, work with the forecasting capability we've got, and really have that 100% view across your entire Microsoft cloud landscape. So I mentioned chargeback, showback, and oh, hello, I've got a screen that's decided to misbehave on my demo company, but you can see if we just load to another screen, This will pull in more of that sort of detail, and then we'll move to look at some of the summaries. And let's just have this one fire up. Here we go. So we can see those run rates and got further ability to really drill down in different areas and also look across those run costs. And you can see the run rate, the day summaries, and also the day details. I'm not going to go into every single one of these because we haven't got enough time on the demo today. So that's something for a follow-up. But you can see across the top as well, we've got the resource descriptions and also the number of subscriptions that you want to bring in scope. Now we support multi-tenant, and I'm not aware of a limit on the number of subscriptions we bring in. We've got customers with hundreds of subscriptions, and one customer at the moment's got millions of objects that are ingested through their range of subscriptions that are pulling in, and that's all being crunched. So what happens with that crunching of that data? So our recommendations engine sits in the background and looks through a number of scenarios to come up with recommendations for optimization. So you can see on this screen, we've got a range. As I said, it's a small tenant. We have typical ranges sort of aggregated across 365 and Azure with sort of 5 to 35% at a real high end, with a sort of middle band being in that sort of 10 to 20, 25% range. And so there's a lot you can do with that if you have a significant Microsoft commitment. So on this page here, we can drive some of the analytics by diving in. So show me sort of reserved instances. I can click in the screen. This will pull me through to what we're seeing with regards to a particular VM. You can manage those reserved instances and make sure they're maximized, and you've got that full optimization there. We just go back, and I can also move down to other areas across my VM savings plans, idle and oversized services, and look at the recommendations being surfaced, as much as seeing the entire view as well. So we just drill in here, I'll pick that one at the top. And the recommendation there, consider adding a savings plan for compute on an hourly basis for that particular subscription. So it's very specific to the uninitiated and making it very easy to then say, okay, yeah, we need to action this. And so we can take that away. So remember, we're a read-only tool. We don't push anything back into your tenant from here, meaning you can do the proper analysis and say, yeah, this fits with the plan, this meets with objectives, or this is building up to being sort of material set of changes that we want to bring into our environment to drive optimization. Idle and oversized services. So this is just redundant or perhaps misconfigured machines that it might be running and that not being fully utilized. So the engine's looking for those to then say, well, actually, you could run that on a half-size machine. So we can go into those. You'll see a recommendation coming down. So in this case, review for resizing or just shut down the resource and just reduce that run cost. So in our large environments, if you've got any particular cloud sprawl, then this is great for keeping a rolling view and keeping a lid on those costs. You'd be surprised at how much of this gets out of control very quickly. Another area we've got here is zombie resources. Another area where we see a lot of cloud wastage, and that is where people are tearing down services in the cloud, but actually it's not 100% of what they stood up in the first place for perhaps a particular resource group or anything to support a particular project. So this is where you could have storage accounts left behind and other sort of peripheral services related to that. So the engine's looking for those services that are related, shortlisting those as potential zombies for you to then say, yeah, but this is low-hanging fruit, and we should pretty much have our zombie resource count near zero, or sort of rolling objective. So back to that sort of operational need to be constantly on the ball. And then you can see here we've got non-prod services all the way through to the VM optimization. So you've seen a step through the inform optimize section, then you'd be operating your platform. To get going, I think Andy mentioned this at the end, but we have the concept of a health check. And the health check is just a high level view. It's complementary from Kocho to just plug into your environment, go through the simple 4-step onboarding, accept the EULA, data's ingested. Within a few days of crunching all of that, you can then have a run through this report, and you can see all of the tabs across the top. So we take you through high level view of that optimization opportunity. And also we have to work on a range because we have to make a number of assumptions around each customer's environment. You'll see the cost overview, forecast, all the way through to what we have by way of an assumption on tags, and even a little bit of an insight into what we've seen with regards to security across assets. So that's everything on the Azure side. The tool also plays to the M365 world, and bear with me and just go with that little Teams frustration of the tab at the top that gets right in the way of switching browser tabs. There we go. And switch gears to M365. Now, the M365 side, very different. We have some longer commits, but we also do have extra reservation orders that can come on top for the likes of Visio, Project, now Copilot as an extra SKU on top. So as much as you might have those annual commitments and renewals that's on an anniversary basis, other costs can creep in. And obviously for that 1 year commit, you want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So this M365 part of the platform gives you that financial overview, but you can see on the screen here for the dashboard, we also look at endpoint identity, age of those identities, with join the lever process being a particular area of concern, through to an insight on some security, and then onto the apps and the data with the external file sharing. So if I just switch to the next tab, apologies to my little switcheroo in the background here. So you immerse yourself into the tooling, and you can see on the menus change on the left here. So we're in the 365 part of the platform. So we start off with a company profile and overview. So we've got accounts and profile, and then the domains on the right. Because this is a small demo tenant, obviously we haven't got much data in here, but you would see all of your domains, and in particular the top external domains. As we immerse ourselves into the product, we'll then start looking to say, right, excuse me, in that, back to that FinOps lifecycle, we're going to go through informing. So show me what I've got by way of licensing and contracts. And here you can see the smart tag features now playing through in the M365 world. So the whole tagging concept also applies with all of the SKUs and identities and assets in M365. So it's not obvious on the page here. However, at the top, you'll see I've got productivity by line of business, also by country. And that's just to play into a couple of the smart tags we have. Now, the smart tag engine applies across Azure and 365. So if you did the work in the perhaps the Azure part of that, and you said, well, no, that's equally valid for the rest of the organization, I want to apply that in 365 land, then that's absolutely the case, and they can be applied here too. So if we switch gears to say, right, show me by line of business, I can click that tab and I can quickly go to the departments I've got that have been picked up on this side. So for example, if I highlight HQ and finance, what's going on with that office overlap, we can expand this. And you can see on that row there, this is an obfuscated username. So under this particular column, what I'm highlighting here with the mouse would be the UPN, that would be the username. And I can see I've got an office overlap issue. So I can right click, I have a drill through option, and I can go to that license overlap page, as much as some other related reports specific to that user. So really getting you into the weeds of that user, giving you a full 360-degree view, so you can be very certain about the actions you're taking. You're fully informed on how to go forward with any optimization on SKU. If we jump forward from licensing into contracts, you then say, right, well, this tenant in particular is running a 3-year enterprise agreement. You can see that laid out on the page. And as we've got some buttons on the right, that will allow you to then change the view in the tab at the bottom. But more importantly, we've got a view where you can dive into the contract details. So I switch to this page. So I've got my full 3 years laid out. Well, I've got my finances, and you can see across reservations, CSP on top of the EA commit. I also have the volume, so I can go and look at my quantities and see whether we've had any spikes or any tick up in any particular area. And you can see the full list all the way down to the bottom. That's all laid out. Most of our reports, especially when it's a sort of table and all the data laid out like that, it's all exportable. So for those of you that like to live in Excel and do a little bit of processing yourself, that's also there. Obviously, we want to do as much of that for you. That's sort of the whole point of the tool, is to reduce your workload. But we know that some people have specific needs, so we try and provide those export features all over the tool. Excuse me. You can tell I'm trying to fight a cold here that's trying to get a grip. And then in 365, well, we also have the same recommendations engine, very much focused on the M365 licenses. So I'll just caveat the savings range here. This is because we get a bundle of licenses being a Microsoft partner, so that's basically got a whole surplus of licenses, which is skewing our costs. So it's still back to that normal range, that sort of, shall we say, a median of sort of 10 to 25%. But it gives you an overview here, and this is also a page that's in the health check for M365 to just give an indicator as, okay, well, we've got cloud wastage, we've got areas where we can go and focus and dive into the detail. Excuse me. What does that look like on the 365 side? I have to say we've got some releases coming up with a new rules engine and new screens at the end of this quarter. So this is about to change and improve. with the concept of categories, where we're expanding from just financial recommendations to also the adoption, operations, and security pillars. So basically, financial and non-financial recommendations will be able to start coming out from the new engine. So you can see on this screen, and we'll just pick on the first card where we've got users which are disabled, but still have one or more Office 365 license assigned. So we say, okay, that's adding up to a decent number. What do we, who do we need to go and focus on to take some action and free up licenses? So if I look at the one at the very top here, I can see an action here would say this much per month. If there's an ability to true down and maybe you're coming up to that renewal period, it might be a license that is like a Visio or something that you could deallocate and apply somewhere else. But remember, these are disabled licenses for this particular rule. So that what's this going to force? And I've had first-hand experience of this as a CIO in a previous company. If you're not taking care of deallocating with your levers, then the front end, you get the service desk saying, hey, we've run out of licenses. I need to buy another batch of 50 for new starters. And you're constantly buying up. And so, well, hold on a minute. We haven't got a net growth in headcount and therefore licenses. Why aren't we able to circle from the pool? And so this allows you to keep on top of that and keep a lid on that sort of net increase. And you can dive into the specific user account, verify that, yeah, this is definitely a lever. Look, we've got over a year ago of any activity whatsoever on this account. This is a fairly safe bet, and work your way through the list to affect those optimization changes. So we switch on to a page that's in the health check. So again, you'll get an insight as to how the apps are being used. So this is another big part of the platform. So 365, we're touching on the concept of adoption. So you're allocating a license to a user, but are they using all of the features? Is everything being adopted? It'd be a waste of an E5 license if somebody just does email and maybe kicks a little bit of Teams about, or missing out on all the capabilities in OneDrive, in SharePoint, but Loop will be coming in here, and also Copilot as well is going to be an addition on this page. And you can see down the bottom, we've got product consumption. So this can inform where you say, look, we've got an investment, we've committed to this 3-year EA, or even if it's just a rolling annual CSP, but you're at an E3 or E5 level, you're going to want to make sure the organization is leveraging all of those elements, those sort of atomic service plans within the overall SKU. So this is going to identify where, look, we need to do an education plan to drive up usage of SharePoint, or we're actually doing a dark to cloud migration of file servers. Let's track how we're doing on trending across OneDrive and SharePoint to make sure we're seeing that move. And the same might be a big adoption on Teams. Let's make sure we've got Teams usage, and that's pivotable down the bottom here. This one is just showing country. Back to the concept of those smart tags. You can then say, well, what about that department? What about, manufacturing versus marketing versus transport, etc., that we saw in the early slides, to really help you drive that Microsoft Cloud investment up to the maximum that you're going to be able to get. So I'll just finish up the last tab before switching back to Andy. Second one is part of the health check. I mentioned those sort of joiner levers and some of those challenges. So again, in the health check, we'll flag where we're seeing accounts over 180 days with no usage, and some, which is the joiner part of the problem, where you've got accounts created, but there's no activity at all. And obviously, we've let this go bad in our demo tenant on purpose. Hopefully, you don't have these sorts of percentages compared to active, but over 180 days, there's a lever issue. Accounts are staying either active or consuming licenses for over 6 months post exit. And you've got, in this case, a large number where they never even joined. No one's ever logged in, but you've created the account because you said, hey, new joiners coming in, and they choose to then join another company, but nobody follows up. And that's the usual sort of breakdown between IT, HR, and hiring manager. So again, had first-hand experience of that. And so I think hopefully I've taken you through everything we've got across Azure, M365, the fact we've got a health check within both of those tools. And then there's 2 separate health checks, when it's not a problem to initiate both at the same time for those of you that are interested. But Andy, hopefully that's enough of an insight for everyone on the call. Back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Lawrence, and appreciate you taking us through all of that. Well, we're reaching the point of kind of Q&A. So, Lawrence, I don't know if you want to stop sharing for a second, but yeah, please do post questions into the chat if you've got anything. We've not had too many come in yet, but I've got a couple here. So, can you does this going to work with Mac going forwards, Lawrence?
So the Microsoft Azure consumption commitment is a feature that should be released next month. So as part of our February release. And so the answer is yes. And that's a screen that's going to be added into the Azure module to support Mac, and that will help with. And by the way, this is multi-tenant, multi-subscription as well, because we've had enterprise customers basically saying we can't see everything globally. We know we've signed up to a Mac, but we're so big and we'll say disparate, but perhaps not as joined up as they'd like. Then they didn't have the visibility for that central finance team, and so this module helps keep a lid on all of that, and then it will have pointers and recommendations to say, look, on these particular commitments you're under where you need to be on trajectory. Some could be over, so don't put any more resources there, but look, you're under down here, you want to get those back up so that you hit of your overall Mac duration to make sure you end up at hitting the mark at the end and not falling short and having to renegotiate or potentially face penalties.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Okay, another one we've got come in. How does it work with HCI clusters, Lawrence?
Oh God, now you're really testing me. I'll have to
I had a
take that
feeling someone's
offline.
asking a really awkward one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's grenade and pin pulled. Thank you for that question. Apologies, Sarah. So Andy, we'll have to follow up on that one.
I think the answer
I'm the product director for 365. Everybody, by the way, my colleague Nick heads up Azure. I'm sure he'll know the answer to that.
I think the answer is it can, but we'll have to get back to the questioner on that specific answer. So next one, can you add in other products to the consumption insight? So I'm guessing that's a question relating to products beyond just the Microsoft stack potentially.
Yeah, at the moment we're just integrating with the Microsoft APIs. There is a report under 365 that looks at third-party cloud apps and then pulls in the vendors, and that's one that's going to be released this quarter. But in terms of explicit plugging in of other third-party or outside of 365 and Azure at the moment, it's not. But if you have specific needs, more than happy to listen and understand the use case there, because yeah, if it helps with cloud optimization, then we're interested, because that's what we're all about.
Good stuff. I knew there'd be, and they're starting to flood in now, right? So can you separate user accounts from admin accounts to see which are used or unused?
Absolutely. There is a report, and in fact, you'll get an insight in the health check that shows the users. It also shows the admins and their roles. It also shows the usage of those roles. So, for example, we've seen companies where, I know one recently, 5,000 users, and I think they had 200 admins, the global admins, or was it 95? 200 admins, 95 global admins. So way above where any of us would want to say best practices. And then when you break that down, the 95 global admins are changing passwords. So, well, let's regrade those and make them appropriate and make them user admins and reduce the global admins down to ideally 0 to leverage PIM/PAM services with an Azure AD P2 or an E5 license.
Brilliant. Thank you. Really good question just come in. Do the recommendations for the cost savings come from the advisor recommendations service that Microsoft provide, or is this your own algorithms?
These are all our own algorithms recommendations. What you're seeing here is the culmination of combined probably over 100 years worth of cloud transformation experience across the consultants, me included. So I've been doing cloud migration since 2011, 12, I want to say, across Zscaler, Microsoft, most of the big shebang, and the founders also done SAP, Big Compute. So no, it's born out of all of those early days issues, challenges around cloud cost management and best practices in operations. So all of the problems from the early days have all come together and sort of been built into the tooling. And so all the recommendation comes out of the scenarios that we know are challenges for enterprise IT functions.
Excellent, thanks, Lawrence. And the only thing I'd add to that answer as well is, unlike the Microsoft tool set, it's a much more straightforward task to go from the recommendation to what the actual change would be. Because I think quite often people can look at the standard advisor tool sets and go, yeah, okay, how do I do that? And where am I making the changes? So definitely something to look at.
Yeah.
What tenant permissions are needed by the tool?
So we're read-only. Let me just take you through the onboarding process, which is just a few steps. So we do need a global admin because we write an app with an SPN to create effectively surveil in your AAD. But after that, you then get presented with a list of the read-only permissions that basically says these are all the APIs and information that we're going to connect to. Clearly, that's represented also in our EULA from a privacy perspective. So you accept that, you accept the EULA, and then in the background, everything kicks into place and it starts onboarding, which is effectively ingestion through the Microsoft APIs. Depending on the size of your tenant, within 24 hours, we'll certainly have a fairly solid handle on Azure. 365 takes a bit longer because of that user activity information. The second cycle, normally our smart tags then reconcile because we have to work out from your AD, and then the engine does its magic in the background. So within 5 to 7 days, on, what should I say, tenants up to sort of 10,000, you should be good enough to go through looking at that report. I mean, you can within 24 hours, but it's best to just give it 5 days.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And a very specific question about the license model. So are M365 and Azure included in the same license?
No, they're two separate license approaches for the tooling, but I'm sure that's something you can negotiate with Kocho. I'm not going to go into that now.
Indeed.
Yeah, the license structure is separate because we've got customers that may only want one of those two areas.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm sure your sales contact will be in touch to have a chat with you anyway. And very, very specific, last one I can see that's come in so far. How does this plug in if you already have an MSP that you contract through and isn't providing this info? That's a really interesting question. I can talk
probably
to
more
that
of a political question than technical. So the onboarding steps that I just explained, if you're the global admin, I'm assuming the question came from somebody who is the tenant owner, then you can do what you want, can't you? If you choose to plug in another tool to get another angle on it, then fine. I have to say it's happened before where people say, well, we're paying for this managed service, but I don't trust what I'm being told. We've been plugged in. And then they just say, okay, that's interesting. Let's go and have a rather frank conversation with what we've been told so far. Or, we don't think we're getting the service we should be. Plug our tool in, and then shows, okay, so why have I got 500 accounts with licenses that are disabled? Etc. Why haven't you? So yes, we have been used as a bit of a policeman type tooling. We prefer to be seen as the sort of, embed in with your system, work with your processes, and something that you rely on if not a weekly, then certainly a monthly basis to just keep course correcting, keep a lid on things, and keep your cloud optimization in check.
Absolutely. And look, yeah, I'll just add to that very briefly. We have already seen that is the case where someone else is responsible, if you like, for the day-to-day management of the Microsoft stack. And we're coming in initially almost as a verification audit capability, and we're happy to do that for obvious reasons. We don't insist on taking over from the MSP, but I think the insights will potentially be extremely useful, and the service itself can run in parallel to an existing MSP. What we're really then into is a conversation around the actual remediation work and who is responsible for it, but we'll happily have that chat with you. So yeah, it's a common scenario, and at the moment I suspect the questions come from, I simply don't know. This looks rather interesting. I'd suggest you have a health check and have a look, quite frankly. So anyway, I think we've kind of made it through the end of all the questions. We've just got the final pieces to share here. So in terms of, as we mentioned, if you do want to have a look at this and bring it to life in your environment, you've obviously seen the capabilities of the tool set. We'd love to help you with the possibility of running a health check in your environment. It's going to bring the data to life for you in terms of what you've already got out there. And I think logically what it will show is the art of the possible of how potentially you could potentially right size your spend and also keep it right sized on an ongoing basis. And just as a final piece, just a quick sneak peek that I know, Lawrence, you've allowed us to mention briefly, is there's something new coming also.
There is, yes, absolutely a sneak peek. So we have Copilot. I call it a module, but it's included within the Essentials and Guardian license, which is the security element, which I didn't touch on today, but because it basically leans on those two for the data access. But we have a Copilot module or capability that looks through the lens of, well, how ready am I with my current license profile? What do my candidates look like across my organization? And what's the potential impact from a cost perspective? We also look at the environment, and leveraging the smart tags that I've mentioned in the demo, you can then say, well, where are my candidates by geography, by department? And then you can start choosing and planning how you want to go through deployment. And the candidates are shortlisted in terms of strong, likely, and everyone else is marked as unlikely. And we've got some arbitrary thresholds which you can pick, because everyone has got different criteria for who they think should have a Copilot license based on their 365 activity. So, for example, we've picked, probably, I think our default is just going straight thirds, but you might say, no, I need to see activity above 50% for likely and above 75% as a strong candidate, because we're perhaps a low margin business and this is a very expensive SKU, so we need to make it a fairly high bar for entry. So that's something that we're going to put as a sort of under the bonnet configuration item, so that it will then tune this front end, so you can say, actually, according to our sort of allocation for Copilot policy, just to keep a lid on things, I don't want these costs running away, then these are our criteria, and then we'll monitor. The tool, we're only showing you the summary screen here, but the idea is to help you with that readiness framing, look at the environment tenant-wide for those key pillars, and get sort of guardrail indicators that Microsoft have laid out, allow you to analyze on a per candidate user basis. And then once allocated, we're also looking at the usage of that SKU. It's an expensive SKU. Are we getting value from it? Are the allocations that we've made, is it being used, and where are we seeing that usage? So we can go all the way down to the interactions per app over time. Again, pivot by smart tag to see, well, actually, we've got heavy usage there in marketing, but not so much in manufacturing. I'm just picking on departments, but I think you get the idea. So hopefully that's enough of a taster, a carrot dangler for you and everybody.
Excellent. Sneak peek. Thank you for that, Lawrence. Well, look, everyone, thank you for taking time to join us today. Appreciate you're all busy, and making time in your diary is never easy. So yeah, thanks for joining. There will be a follow-up. We'll be in touch. There'll be a recording available of this session. There are some product sheets available also, and I'm sure a member of our sales team will be in touch with you to see what the feedback is and what you think of the service. So thanks for joining us today, and yeah, look forward to speaking again with you soon.